Hello and welcome back to another episode of Black Guys on White Movies. First, it's me, Aaron Covington, your host,
Co-host here, Aman Adumer.
And your guest host, Bernard Harris.
and this week we're doing the Truman Show from 1998, starring Jim Carrey. Very interesting movie, very interesting movie to watch. I think it ages well over time, or at least the premise. I think this is one of the more fascinating premises in all of storytelling. Like it's up there with any premise, from history, because it really tickles the imagination of, if you watched it, it'll just tickle your imagination of what this means and what it could mean and the moral implications of it and the ethics of it. It's a lot going on in this movie to be such a simple premise. Let me read the log line on IMDb. An insurance salesman discovers his whole life is actually a reality TV show. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty spot on.
I mean, that's
basically
perfect. I was expecting more, but no, that gets it.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll dive into how this all comes to be in a second. Black movie of the week, lead us off. So sometimes a black movie of the week is more about a black performance than a whole movie. There aren't really direct analogs to the Truman Show that are black movies, although that would be fascinating in a whole another way. Really putting anybody other than a straight white male in there does change it quite a bit. But for the black movie of the week, I went with Will Smith, An Enemy of the State.
Whoa.
Yeah.
A movie filled with like paranoia. He's being watched. He's running. Government's after him. Organizations that he doesn't know are after him. He doesn't even know what he did, what he has. He has to rely on Gene Hackman to kind of help him through as kind of his paranoid guru in a way. But that's why I chose it. I think it's one of the more underrated Will Smith movies. And it really captures this feeling of just being watched all the time, which is literally what the Truman Show is.
It also has like every kind of young, I don't know what it would have been. It wasn't been a hipster at the time, but whatever the 90s version, like every young comedic white actor is like the hacker core team that's like the ones doing all the tracking stuff from like their bunker or whatever. And they're just all like going at each other. It's like everybody from that 90s era who was funny doing anything is one of those hacker like tracker guys.
Yeah, like Seth
Jamie
Green, Jack Black.
Jamie Kinney. I think Jamie Kennedy's in there, maybe.
Tom Sizemore, Barry Pepper, all these guys. Just a slew of like white character actors.
For sure.
Most of whom still working today. Shout out to Regina King, who's his wife in the movie. She's also in it.
Yeah, she is.
Scott Conn, Jason Lee. Yeah, just
Wow.
Yeah.
a slew.
Jason Lee. Definitely Jason Lee for sure. Isn't that like a Tony or Ridley Scott, one of the two Scott brothers?
Yeah, Enemy of the State is directed by Tony Scott.
Right. Yeah.
Ooh, okay.
A little. Go ahead.
No, I'm curious to watch this. I don't think I've ever caught this movie, but you're describing all this cast, and I'm like, I must have seen this movie on TV. It must have been.
Exactly, man. It's the under the radar Will Smith movie.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I saw that one in the theater for sure.
It's like his only one that's not like super big, It was just like what they call now like the adult middle range budget movie that wasn't especially comedic and wasn't like high sci-fi concept, but it was good. It was good.
Yeah, it's a solid action piece for sure.
Yeah. You sold me on Hackman, Smith, Face Off.
Yeah. Giving us more Hackman.
More Hackman, please.
It's definitely Gene Hackman doing Hunt for Red October level, like screaming at Will Smith.
For sure. What are you
Or not
doing?
Hunt for I'm sorry, Crimson Tide. Crimson Tide.
Oh, Crimson Tide. Another man. Should do Crimson Tide. That's one of my favorites, man.
Yeah.
Back to the Truman Show. A little background on this. Really good, interesting team behind it. All right. So like Peter Weir was the director who did like Master and Commander with who's the white dude?
Russell Crowe.
Oh, Russell Crowe.
Russell Crowe. Yeah.
And Paul Bettany.
And Paul Bettany, Vision. Um, he did Dead Poets Society as a director. He did this movie Witness with Harrison Ford. That's a great thriller from the 90s. So just a really, really solid director from the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. The writer is Andrew Niccol, more from the late 90s and the 2000s, but he did Gattaca, which we've done on the pod.
Yes, we have.
He
Okay.
did Lord of War, which is a fun Nicolas Cage movie. The science fiction film The Host, which was a solid, like, kind of young adult thriller as a writer. So he's had and he was a writer and producer on The Terminal, Tom Hanks stuck in the airport movie.
Oh,
Which is
wow.
also an interesting movie.
Oh man, this is a prolific writer of.
I'm telling you, this was a good team behind this, and one of the producers is Scott Rudin,
Mhm.
who just like has like a who's who of movies,
Mhm.
and he also has done a bunch of Broadway plays. So some of his movies are like the South Park movies, Zoolander, Social Network, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Uncut Gems, Fences, No Country for Old Men. Some of his Broadway plays are Book of Mormon, Hello Dolly,
Mhm.
and the list goes on. So
It's interesting that you say that because one of the senses that I got during while watching the movie is like, man, this is very, very play-like. It's like it feels like a play. It feels like something from Broadway.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great point. It's like a self-contained location,
Mhm.
and I mean that's the whole setup is the production element of everything.
Yeah.
even on the Wikipedia page in a section about a possible sequel, which we'll talk about sequel ideas later, he says there's been talk of doing a musical
That would make
or a
sense.
series, but this could definitely be a musical because of the idyllic setting
Mhm.
of this
Mhm.
world. Like you could definitely see them breaking into song.
Yeah.
Like, why would you want to leave? Why would you want to leave?
I yeah, I almost like started belting out the next line. But yeah, no, even like the thing where like they as their full like middle-aged selves are like playing high school versions of themselves in flashbacks. It was just like
Yeah.
that's like a very play thing where suddenly the curtains split and they're wearing like a Letterman sweater or something like that, and you're like, oh.
Costume change.
Yeah.
We're in high school now. Remember back when
Using that old school like slang just to be like, oh, we're young again. Hey,
Right.
what? Hey, let's get hip with this.
Right. Shucks,
Oh.
Johnny.
quickly on the cast of this. This is actually like a kind of a who's who cast at the time, and especially now. Everybody's even like bigger now.
Mhm.
Jim Carrey as a lead. This was like his first, right? His first.
Serious.
Yeah. And
Oh, okay.
it's not that this isn't comedic. It obviously is. But before this, well, okay, so let me kind of run through Jim Carrey's like big roles, right? And if you know, then you know like the difference in comedic and Jim Carrey comedic.
For
Ace
sure.
Ventura, Pet Detective, The Mask.
One of the greatest
Dumb and-
movies ever made. Ace
Which
Ventura.
one? Ace Ventura.
Peck Detective, the first one. It's a solid detective story.
I mean, it really is a comedy classic, you know.
Oh, yeah.
The Mask, Dumb and Dumber, all three of those, it says came out in 94, which is unbelievable.
Right.
And
Wow.
then he played the Riddler in Batman Forever, which again is over the top. Like, and remember, Jim Carrey came from In Living Color,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
where he played some really like big characters on that sketch show.
Yeah.
It's wild too
Ace,
because
mhm.
go ahead.
He does Ace Ventura Part 2, Liar Liar, and he also does The Cable Guy, which is still a big, broad performance, but it's a really dark movie.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Then he does The Truman Show, which is straddles the line. It's a little more comedy, or I mean, a little more dramedy or comra. Nobody ever says it that way.
No,
Comedy, drama. No, okay, maybe that doesn't work.
it's okay.
Maybe it does.
We're working something out.
We're working it out. But this was definitely a departure from like, and he still sprinkled some of it in there where he like improvises a little bit, but it marked like in terms of the branding of Jim Carrey, it marked a departure from these big Ace Ventura, Dumb and Dumber, like over the top comedic physical comedy roles, and it paid off for him in a
And
big way.
everything you just said, all those movies, however many you just named, that was within 4 years.
Yeah,
I mean, this is from '98. Those first couple movies came out in '94. Like, it's crazy.
this
Mm.
man has classics.
That boy was
Truly.
working.
Yeah. Strike after strike. Oh man, that makes sense. 1 year, his rate probably shot 10 times up for his movies immediately.
It's interesting. I think maybe even what led me to this, I saw a TikTok where Jeff Bridges was talking about Dumb and Dumber
Mhm.
and how, well, it doesn't really matter what he was saying, and we're not doing Dumb and Dumber, but basically that Jim Carrey negotiated on Dumb and Dumber because Ace Ventura had already been shot, and people around the town had known about it, and everybody was like, "Oh man, we got a monster coming." So then he had like so much control on Dumb and Dumber
Wow.
Oh,
because Ace Ventura hadn't even been released yet, but people had seen it around town,
Wow.
around LA and Hollywood, and they knew like they knew the game was getting shut down.
wow.
And then by the time the Truman Show was coming out, he was already getting like $20 million a movie,
Yeah.
and he took a cut. And just in reading about this movie, he took like 12 million to do this movie, which was a pay cut for him in 97. Or yeah, when
Mm.
they shot it in 97. So the money is staggering.
It's That's absolutely wild. You know, when you mentioned in Living Color, I think it's just interesting, right? Because Jim Carrey had been, I mean, his first, I looked at the IMDb this morning as well, you know, right? His first thing, Rubber Face, is like from '81. And I've
Right.
definitely remember that was like one of those covers that I would see on the shelf in the video store. But let me be like, is that Jim Carrey? But I never actually got. But the fact of the matter is, like, he really kind of works all through the '80s, but it's not really until he's on In Living Color that's like the thing that gives his career like gas, you know what I'm saying? And then all of a sudden
100%.
he's making Ace and then everything you just said.
You broke up a little bit, so if you had
Oh,
something super
uh,
poignant there, repeat it.
bummer. I was just saying, he was working through through the '80s, but it wasn't until In Living Color that really like just his career took off. You know what I mean? And he got Ace, and
Mm.
everything went great.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And the stories, I remember listening to Jamie Foxx tell a story about walking into Jim Carrey's dressing room during In Living Color and being like, what are you doing? What are you writing?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm writing this pet detective movie that I'm gonna do." And it's just to know what the trajectory of his career would be after In Living Color is, who would have guessed? Who'd have guessed?
Who'd have guessed? And also another, white product coming out of a black environment. Let's go.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, that's
Also, Jim Carrey is Canadian.
right.
Oh, right.
So much great comedy does not come from like the privileged class. It comes from like Canadians, it comes from
Mhm.
Jewish people, or it comes from black people, Mexican Americans, Asian Americans, I think it's hard for the privileged class to really nail comedy, and then I mean, not that they can't. You get like a Will Ferrell, you know, who's obviously delivered time
Mhm.
and time again,
Mhm.
but there's something like comedy has to poke at something. So if you're privileged, what are you don't really want anything to change, or
Yeah.
maybe you
Yeah.
don't perceive the differences. So what are you? What's
Mm.
your stance? What's your point of view? Just hey, things are pretty good, you know?
Yeah,
Right.
you don't perceive the imbalance that comedy comments on.
Right.
Yes. Yes. That's 100% right. And even the examples we can think of, like Will Ferrell, he is playing characters that are aware of their privilege and like idiocy, like unaware of their idiocy and like poking
Yeah.
fun at that.
He often plays kind of like idiot type characters
Mm-hmm.
who are very loud. You know, he's very like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's interesting. So yeah, also going through this cast, man, which we'll probably touch on again later, but the main people like Laura Linney, who's I mean, always delivers. If you get Laura Linney, she's gonna commit, bro. And she's gonna deliver.
She's the Viola of her race.
I felt like in '98, if you get Laura Linney, like that movie's and it's like a serious adult product like this, like that's box office gold. Like you're getting bankrolled
Yeah.
easy. You know what I mean? Like she's
I mean,
especially at this time, she was considered like a serious actress. You know what I mean?
yeah, she's coming off of like Jurassic Park.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Wait, Laura Linney's in Jurassic Park?
Is
Oh
she?
wait, no. I got him confused. But
Yeah, you,
that's what I'm saying.
I was like, I was with you, and then I was like,
Yeah, I was like, she could be for all I know. Maybe in one of the
I mean,
two,
Well,
three, or four.
she played the voice of the dinosaurs.
yeah, exactly. She was the second Velociraptor.
Yeah.
Amazing performance. Lived in it for months.
Yeah,
She
yeah.
was in like,
Oscar snub. Oscar snub. Should have got nominated.
but she was in big movies at the time. Searching for Bobby Fischer, which is a movie I still like. Congo was a big movie. Primal Fear and Absolute Power were two absolutely like big movies at the time. And of course, she's been in Ozark, right?
Oh yeah,
Oh
yeah.
yeah, for sure.
Which is a more recent show. And she did wasn't she in let me look here. Well, anyway, she's been in a bunch of stuff. Just leave it at that.
No, she's
And then we have
super committed.
Ed Harris
Hmm.
in a really funny role. He got nominated for an Academy Award in this one.
Oh, interesting.
Noah Emmerich, who's just like a classic character actor, always pops up. You know, he might be a good guy. He does both. Sometimes he's
Yeah.
like the best friend, but sometimes he's like the devious, like FBI agent.
Yeah, he's
Then
really
you
good
got like,
at Americans.
oh, the Americans. Oh, yeah.
He's
Oh,
really good at
man.
Americans.
Great role in the American. And then like Paul Giamatti is in this.
Yeah, I forgot about that. I noticed that. I'm like, what?
He's just one of the like
Yeah,
production guys. It's like, that's
Mhm.
Paul Giamatti.
yeah. The classic like wasn't doing their job. Character was able to evade the situation because of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Like he
And
just goes
then
to
like,
work, you know.
yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, he's always great. Um, and so it just kind of fills out, right? Natasha Mac McElhone,
I've always said McElhone. I don't know if that's
McElhone.
correct, but that's what I've always said.
Yeah. And then like when you look him up, even if you don't recognize the name, like Holland Taylor, she was in it as like the mom. You've seen her in a bunch of stuff. Peter Krause, who's on the show 911 now. You recognize his face. Philip Baker Hall has like maybe 5 minutes in the whole movie as one of the like producers,
Mm.
but he's in there. It's just kind of funny to see people with such like small roles who like are big in other things or even bigger now.
Yeah, it's like every character actor there is in this movie.
Yeah. Okay, so that's a little background. Well, one other thing, similar to Pretty Woman, which we did recently, this movie started out as like a more sci-fi thriller script.
Mm-hmm.
That makes
Yeah,
sense.
That makes a lot of sense. I was going to ask. I'm like, this is a sci-fi for sure. I was
Yeah.
going to ask Bernard, expert on sci-fi.
I mean, I was definitely like, I've seen it a couple of times in my life, and I definitely got the kind of sci-fi premise of it before, but it was the first watching it this time was the first time where I was just like, oh yeah, this is undeniably like this is sci-fi. This is an alternate universe where for the last 30 years, most of LA has been taken up by a huge thunderdome. Like this is definitely sci-fi.
Yeah. But again, this is a case where the director thought it was a great concept, but maybe a little too dark, too depressing.
Mhm.
And they wanted a movie that would make some money. So they rewrote it and
Mhm.
pitched it to Jim Carrey, and eventually it became what we see here.
I feel
Interesting.
like just knowing where it, comes up in 98, you know what I mean? It was probably around for at least a few years before it started actually production or whatever. So it's like, is this like a movie that was written in response to like Arnold Schwarzenegger's The Running Man or something like that? Like right around one of those like
Hmm.
80s, future sci-fi sort of things, and a man who has to escape a game. You know what I mean? Is knowing that it's that it started out more serious. It kind of feels like of that era.
It would be interesting to hear the writer talk about his original idea and how he came to it.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's definitely, I mean, it's just like you said, it's in the wake of those of those movies, especially the '80s or even the high concept sci-fi of the era.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the beginning of the internet age and beginning of reality TV. Like the real world was already on by this point.
Mhm.
Yeah, I feel like
The MTV show, The Real World, for anybody who's listening, who's like, what's that? I'm only 20 years old. I don't know anything.
I feel like I don't think Big Brother was in the States yet, but I definitely feel like it existed overseas because
Mm.
it's like started out in the UK. And by 98, 97, I don't remember. I thought to look it up, but I forgot. But I think like Survivor would have been out too.
Mm.
Like that era was just like kicking in.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if this is a response, I if this is a response to that so early on, I wonder how much of reality TV has been inspired by the Truman Show now,
Mm.
where this was a satire of early reality TV, but I bet later reality TV, like more Big Brother, more other types of shows, they could easily be inspired by this.
For sure. It's certainly a big pop culture movie. Like it, even watching it again, I'm like, yeah, man, like this was like everywhere.
This was
Mhm.
huge. And so huge, in fact. Well, there's two things. One, a year later, a movie called Ed TV came out
Eh,
with starring Matthew McConaughey. And that movie was a decent comedy. It wasn't too bad, but because it was less than a year after the Truman Show, like the impact of the Truman Show hurt Ed TV. People were like, it's too similar, not as good. But if you could go back, Ed TV should come out before Truman Show, and it wouldn't hurt the Truman Show.
Right.
Mhm.
Truman Show was so big, in fact, that it became a psychiatric like issue that people had. The Truman Show delusion, it's called.
Mm.
Mhm.
Specifically, a psychiatrist, Joel Gold, in 2008 said he had met at least 5 patients with a schizophrenia who believed their lives were reality TV shows.
Oh wow.
And some of them were happy about it. Some of them were like tormented about it. And it was a big deal. People really feeling like their life was reality TV. People were always watching them. People were acting differently around them. And they had
Mhm.
to fulfill the narrative of the show and do certain things to like end the show of their
Wow.
life.
Wow.
I don't know if anybody, took it to the final conclusion for themselves, but they definitely would like travel to distant places or do things to be like, and this is, this is the end. And
Mhm.
people had to get help for that. And it's actually a real thing. So
Yeah, and even on like a smaller level, I think that it that's still around in maybe not like a medically um, uh, uh, there are TikTok trends where people are like, okay, I'm going to make this crazy choice. Why? I'm doing it for the plot. And their
Mhm.
idea is that like we're in a movie. And so let's get like let's make the wild decision. Let's do something a little reckless. Let's do something let's pack up and leave and go live in Thailand for a little while. Let's uh, walk in on a family member, whatever. And I've heard that statement said so many times that I'm wondering, like, oh yeah, maybe people aren't medically diagnosed with any of this, but it's still around.
For sure. Even the opposite of that, which is like, what is two things, right? People talk now about main character, being the main character syndrome. And then there's like the NPC trend, NPC meaning
Yeah.
non-playable character, which is the whole thing on social media, especially TikTok, where people pretend to be a non-playable character, like as if from a video game, which is as if you were a background person in the Truman Show, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then there are videos of people just going, this has to be an NPC. And it's just somebody chilling on a corner, not doing anything.
Yeah, it's
No.
like it's a trend that people use, but it's also a put down people use. Like, but main character is also a put down and a they're both, and you could definitely look at like the Truman Show and Ed TV as things that as definitely a turning point in where media went from like Real World, these movies, and then 2000 is like Survivor and Big Brother, and then however many years later is the Kardashians. Like, there's definitely these main like points
Yeah.
of it growing. You know?
There are definitely eras of like reality TV. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, one of the things that I found interesting, just some family experience with schizophrenia, and I wondered some of that while watching the movie, like because I was thinking about watching this movie and like the year after it, The Matrix comes out, and it sparked a lot of the same sort of
Oh boy.
conversations about
Yeah.
the
Uh,
simulation and is this real, is it not? And just thinking about how these two movies in particular really, you know, not only contribute to that feeling in people who maybe are, secured to reality, but especially for those people who, maybe they've had a break or some sort of separation from reality. Like, it's almost, this sort of story is almost destined to kick that up. Like, we as human beings, we experience the world through ourselves. So for each and every one of us, like, everything is in relation to us. So it's kind of natural. It's natural to feel like things are happening for you or to you specifically, because that's how you take it in. And I could
100%.
just see the world in which, if you're a person who maybe doesn't have a secure grip on, that solid footing of reality, this is either a depiction or portrayal of, or could cause some interesting and unfortunate like ideation.
For sure. What was gonna
100%.
what was gonna say about that? Like, well, first, I think people do in modern like narratives get Truman Show and Matrix kind of confused or tangled up.
Mm-hmm.
And like sometimes people talk about escaping the Matrix or even being woke and these kind of things. But if you, they're really kind of talking about escaping the Truman Show.
Mm.
Hmm.
Escaping like this idea of, because the Matrix was like, and that's a movie we'll probably do at some point. But the Matrix was like the real world in a sense. If you're in the Matrix, you're in an imperfect world.
Mhm.
If you're in the Truman Show, you're in a world that's trying to be perfect, and you feel out of place
Mm.
because it's a facade. You know,
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
but the Matrix was like a simulation of the world with good and bad things, just going off like the dialogue of the Matrix. But the Truman Show, and we'll probably go through the movie here just as soon as I make this other point, which is, people feel like, I found that like the most human thing is to feel like you're not human, right? You think about it, like almost everybody's like, oh, I feel like I don't belong. I feel like I don't fit in, or maybe I'm an alien, or maybe I'm adopted, or maybe I'm something.
Right.
Then I started
Mhm.
to realize like almost everybody is saying this or says it at some point. And then I'm like, actually, to feel like that is the most human thing.
Totally.
Mhm.
I think, I'm gonna before we start going through the movie, I'll take this as a opportunity to you mentioned history earlier, and we're talking about this kind of universal human feeling. And I do think, as we talk about in this podcast, like how these movies and how these narratives reflect on like, white culture, white American culture, Western culture. It's like one of the things that's interesting about this Truman Show, and I haven't seen the research or anything, but I'm almost 100% positive that it has to be kind of a modern day take on these thing called the everyman plays. And we're talking Middle Ages Europe, right? Like knights and ladies and Universal Catholic Church type of deal here. And it was a common play that these traveling actor groups would put on going town to town, plays about this guy whose name was literally Everyman. And every man would have to leave the village and on this journey would encounter, Jesus Christ or angels or the devil or blah blah blah. They'd have to journey out and basically understand that, the world as God created it was a challenge, but ultimately coming home or finding liberation or finding their purpose was the point, right? And so even his name, like Truman versus Everyman, I'm pretty sure
Mm.
there's a continuity there. And then like it's also at the same time in line with kind of, another piece of history, and you guys know history is my thing, but like this kind of enlightenment idea of like the individual, right? And like
Right.
self-actualization, self-awareness, individual freedoms and individual liberty. So it's like if we're talking about how this movie like is an expression of like white American culture, I mean, I think it goes back to before there was in America and before Europeans even called themselves white. Like this is like a story type that is in continuity for at least 1,000 years now. So I think that like you were talking about how the premise just works, and I think there's a reason why that we've been, and we're all Black people, but we do live in Western culture. We live in a European culture here in America. So we've been telling these stories for a long time.
Yeah.
This
Mhm.
English speaking culture.
And they mentioned this book from 1516 called Utopia,
Mm-hmm.
um, that this movie draws parallels to. Not that it was based on or anything like that, but that a lot of people, scholars picked up and like, oh, this is similar to this book where there's like an island with only one entry and everybody knows about it except for this one guy.
Mm.
So yeah, the movie is really interesting. What I didn't remember about this movie is that how uncomfortable he is right at the beginning.
Yes.
Like right at the beginning, he's like looking around. He's talking about Fiji. He's wondering where this girl from that he had a crush on went. Like he's got this one, got this feeling that something's
Mhm.
not right, but he's still living his life and putting on a happy face and kind of trying to hide his paranoia. And I think that is a big difference from how the movie would be today. Like today, something would have to happen to spark him remembering the past. But
Mm.
in this movie in the 90s, it's right at the beginning, he's like kind of paranoid about it and doesn't know what's going on and knows everything's a little off, but he's just so settled into the way things are, which um, speaks to me to this automation. I think that like life in general, but especially technology can lead us to, where you
Mm.
end up just kind of you may be dissatisfied, but you still go through emotions, and a lot of like self-help stuff is really telling you to break your automation. That's why they talk about being in the present and things. It's like break through your automation. And this movie is actually a great metaphor for like opening up your imagination and finding your own path and things. But anyway, at the beginning, we don't really know much about Truman, but we know that he lives in this idyllic Americanized town, which is also interesting that in creating this TV show, they created like a perfect 1950s type of like town for him to live in.
Yeah, I thought there was definitely something about like clearly, you know, it's a baby boomer like creative age group, right? So like they're definitely commenting on their childhood, that kind of 1950s, 60s America, or at least the
Yeah.
TV version.
Mhm.
And then we really don't find out the story until like more than halfway through. But you do know that like he's being watched. They flash to people in the real world watching him, like at work or wherever, watching him at home. And you can tell the actors are like keyed in on what's happening. Everybody around him is like, they do a really good job of setting up where people are purposely like pitching things to the camera while they're talking to Truman. They set up his wife as being kind of like oblivious to some things that he's saying, so she can like pitch things or kind of keep the story moving. The Laura Linney character. But he can't stop thinking about this girl from high school who was a background extra in the show,
Right.
but who he locked eyes with and was attracted to and was kind of into. Uh, and he found ways to like sneak away with her. And eventually the show was like, she's not the lead. That's not the narrative we're telling. And they took her off the show by having her dad come and say, "What are you doing?" They were like on the beach, and her dad was like, "What are you doing? You can't be out here. Get in the car. We're moving." And because he's an actor, Truman's like, "Where are you going?" And the guy just says, Fiji.
Right.
Right.
Truman spends the rest of his life in this world being like, "I got to get to Fiji, man. That's where my girl is." He's telling everybody, like, he's telling his best friend, he's telling his wife, he's like, "I want to go to Fiji. What about Fiji?"
Yeah. He
He's-
married his wife and still talking about this girl he can't stop thinking about. It's like she had to be an actor not to be like, all right, this relationship is over.
She's like, "Fiji, what about this coffee mug from
right.
why don't you drink this instead?"
Yeah, no, it's crazy that a piece of improv like determined like the course of his life like that.
They should have just, this is so interesting because in reality TV now, where it really has conditioned us to reward bad behavior, in the Truman Show, they do not want bad behavior.
Right.
Right.
Right. They want
And
to.
so if it were modern, they would have been like, "Hey, let's just bump her up to series regular."
Yeah, for sure.
You know?
They'd be like, the chemistry's working. Let's make this. We can alter this story.
Yeah, for sure. And leave more booze around set for poor decisions to happen.
Oh, truly, truly. And it seems like all the viewers love Truman, where like there's nothing he does that can sour, the audience's opinion of him. But they've seen him grow up all the way. So I'm like, you must have seen him do something incorrect, right? They must have seen him do something blue, like discover.
For sure.
You know what I'm saying? They must have seen something. They can't just be on board the whole time. In the shower, they must have seen him in the shower being like, all right, well,
This is very interesting that's like the dividing line for you as an audience member. Like, that's it. I like Truman until he discovered his own sexuality, and now I'm out.
That's disgusting. They put this on TV.
I do think it's interesting though. I never really thought about like everybody, at least all the fans that we see watching, like everybody's here for it, right? Like, and not just the show, but they're like rooting for Truman. And I don't know if the movie insinuates that they're first off rooting for the show and then by the end they're rooting for Truman, but it is interesting that nobody's like, fuck this Truman guy, which is, I feel like if it were real life or modern, there would definitely be some people who would have bad opinions about Truman.
Yeah. The only thing they introduce is like the people, and we really only see it through this girl that gets fired from the show, that there's like an activist group that's like, free Truman, like this is wrong, to manipulate this person like him. But then we meet Ed Harris, and towards the end, he tells us like what happened. So Truman was an unwanted pregnancy. He was born, going to be given up for adoption, but instead the corporation adopted him.
Mhm.
And so from birth, he was placed in this world of what the Truman Show in his life had been broadcasted since then, with a fake mom, fake dad, actors play his mom and dad, and all his friends, etc., etc. Everybody in this world is an actor. And it does, it's so extreme, but it's like it's just presented in a way where you kind of get it
Mhm.
from the premise standpoint, right? From
Mhm.
like of it being a story.
Right.
That it does feel something that's just like really pretty evil, but not beyond a human's realm of conceptualization.
Mhm.
Yeah,
You
it's
can
like
see Disney being like, that's not a bad idea, you know?
Yeah, yeah. We're just gonna do it right. They messed it up.
The writers are on strike. Let's just start
let's
put all
just
these babies on
adopt
camera.
this baby. No, I definitely think it's interesting. It definitely does that thing where it's just like kind of one step past, conscience, right?
Yeah.
It's like what is the show? Black Mirror kind of lives in
Yeah.
that space. You know what I mean? Like the thing that's
This is
just
definitely a precursor to Black Mirror also,
for
right?
sure. I was
Oh, for
thinking about
sure.
that while watching it. It's a Black Mirror episode, 100%.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I just thought that was pretty interesting from that sort of standpoint.
Quickly kind of guide you through the rest of the movie. He gets more and more paranoid. He really starts noticing the patterns. Everybody's following like these patterns every day to make the world seem so perfect. He has like the heart of an explorer. He told his teacher when he was a kid he wanted to be an explorer, and she was like, "That's stupid. Yeah, he can't explore nothing. Shut up." Everybody's been crushing his dreams, but in his heart, he knows there's more out there. He knows this girl he had a crush on is out there. And he devises a way to get out. And really, it's when his best friend, like, he's breaking down. He's like losing it. He took his wife on a drive and tried to escape the city, but they had all these manufactured obstacles. They set like a fake fire to stop him from driving through the highway. And they caught him, and he ended up back home. And he was like, "Oh, I can't get out of here." And he always gets a drink with his buddy in like some lone spot. And his buddy was like, "Truman, if this world were fake, if everybody was against you, then I would be in on it too. I'm your best friend." But that's kind of the moment when Truman's like, you are in on it, my guy."
Right.
For
Right.
you to say that, it like he was like, everybody is in on it. There's only one way for me to get out. He's he plays like he's back to his normal self. Um, because he scared his wife so much, they take her off the show. She like divorces him and leaves, and he like feigns a kind of depression or something, hides in the basement, but he escapes, and nobody knows where he is. He goes to the fake beach, and he's on the ocean trying to escape. And Ed Harris is like, he can't escape. That's my guy. That's Truman. I love him, and
Mhm.
he's my product. Sets these like fake thunderstorms. People are watching and scared that they're gonna kill him. The people that work for the production are like, this is like, you've gone too far. Eventually he quiets the storm, and Truman's boat runs into like the end of the dome, like the end of this fake world. That's like a stage or like it's just fake.
Mhm.
And then he talks, Ed Harris like channels into the world, talks to him over the speaker. They have a conversation, and he's like, you can't go anywhere. Very like that evil, manipulative. Like, where are you gonna go? This is your world. You're scared. You can't go. And Truman's like, I got no other choice. I gotta go. He climbs these steps that they put out there and steps out into the real world. Amazing.
I think is interesting, within that last piece, right? You're really getting a lot of the great stuff. When they're searching for him, there's the line, cue the sun. And they like it's nighttime and they turn the sun on so that it's daytime and people
Mhm.
can help
Right,
find him.
right.
And
Weather
that line,
manipulation.
Yeah, that line, cue the sun, is like, it really almost like encapsulates the entire movie, like of what is possible because it's fake, right?
Right.
And there's a part when he's sailing, and one of the production guys has a great line. He says, "How can he sail? He's in insurance." And there's like a lot of really funny, like very subtle lines like that. But I thought that part was really interesting because, you know, the last time I saw this was probably a very long time ago. So I would think that it would have been before that I maybe had some of the craft knowledge and just writing knowledge that I have now. But like this really sticks to like the beats, like that scene with the buddy is the midpoint, right? And it's perfect, right? He's telling him it's all, even though everything that you see is crazy, this is all real, and I'm here with you. And like and like you said, Truman seemingly accepts it. And then you get to the end there, and now you have Ed Harris, who that best friend was being the voice of, right? He was literally speaking into his headset, right? And now Ed Harris, as the producer, is the first time he addresses Truman, and he tells him the truth, right? He doesn't give him the lie. He says, you know,
Point, yeah.
this is, you know, I believe that this TV can be even better than reality. You don't want to be out there. And at that point, right, Truman doesn't accept it. He wants the real world. So it's like, man, it just hits all of those beats so well. Even like, you know, the whiff of death is like the storm. It's a really, I'm going to have to go back and watch it a little bit just for a little bit of like writing.
Yeah, definitely.
The pacing and the focus of this movie, I think, is really exceptional. You know, just in even having like the waitresses watching it and the guy in the tub watching it. They only cut to them, you know, maybe 4 or 5 times, and they're never on the screen that long, but it shows enough of the outside world for you to know that people are really invested in this without having to give us a whole nother story about why these people are invested in things. Because they're not what the story's about. It's about Truman. And we also don't delve into like the real lives of any of the actors on the show.
Right.
And if it were a series, I could definitely see that. That would be important. But in a movie, it's like we're sticking with Truman and his journey, and you just understand that these people, and then there's things that he sees along the way, like when they're taking the girl that he likes away, she tells him, "It's not real. They're watching you. It's all fake." So that's the first thing that really sets him off. And one time he like sneaks by people, and he finds like a crafty. He finds crafty.
Yes.
A lady sitting by a table of snacks, like a movie set, and he's like, "What is she doing there?" And they push him away. They close the door. It's like, that's nothing. You don't need to worry about
it. And then later his wife is like, "Did you hear about the elevator accident over like the elevator that the lady was sitting behind?"
Right.
Like everything they do, the radio is all like trying to get him to not believe that what's happening is actually happening, you know?
Yeah, truly. This is like the gaslighting show. Like they just gaslit Truman his whole life. And the fact that he was able to break away says a lot about his character. And there all the little moments of, it was almost like one of those old school comedies where anytime he was getting too close to something, they would just send, let's just send like 15 senior citizens who are jogging to get in his way so that he can't get to, get the answer that he's looking for. Let's try to throw everything in the way of this man who's trying to figure things out.
What do you think it says about his character? That he's able to still, at the end, it's funny because he's like, "Truman, what are you going to do?" And he turns and he has this catchphrase from the show that he develops. He says, "In case I don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night." And then he bows like an actor, because he's been putting on a show for 30 years or whatever. And he bows like final curtain call,
I think that's where it goes into darkness, right? He opens that door, the exit, and it's just darkness. I think that's where the original gritty version of this movie, you enter that for a little bit and you just hear a shot off camera. Like, oh my God, Truman couldn't handle it. He couldn't live in this world.
I do
I
think
do.
it says something like people, so, I have a kid on the way, and I think you start to realize when you look at kids and think about yourself as a kid that there are some things that were like innate in you
Mhm.
and that you just can't shake, like
Yeah.
you're destined for something in this
Mhm.
world.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not always like world famous greatness, but it's something. I see our guy, I got hooked on these TikTok videos of a guy who fixes the hooves of cows, right? So every video is him like, oh, this cow stepped on a rock and it, did something to it. So he scrapes the hoof and stuff. And like that's this guy's purpose in life, to take care of these cows. And I guess through TikTok, like to share it. And he's talked about how he learned from somebody else. So this is the calling of a number of people, and how they found it. They were always going to find it. Some things are innate. Some, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a creative person, if you're a numbers person, it's like you're going to be something you are. And the more that you're not allowed to do that, you can have a lot of dissatisfaction and paranoia in life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't necessarily know what it says about him. I'd have to think a little bit further about that, but I do like the touch that when he steps through that door, we don't see him anymore.
We don't
What
see him anymore.
we immediately cut to Natasha McElhone opening the door in her own apartment building and running down the stairs, and she like serves as our kind of like Truman in that moment, like right, like her running down those stairs and out into the world to go find Truman is almost like us getting to see what Truman does next in that. And I really think, the way they use Natasha McElhone in the movie was very interesting because, like, first and foremost, like the movie kind of hangs his memory on her eyes, and she's an actress with an amazing pair of eyes that look really great on camera. And I think a lot of movies have used her eyes in that way. But
When a
it is just
Jamaican gets angry.
Why don't Jamaicans
Oh.
Ad.
Ad.
You should have let it play. We could have got paid, man. Let it play.
Right, for sure. Exactly.
All the company.
Right. Chocolate sweetie O's, like the wife in Truman
Yeah.
Show. But yeah, no, I love that touch that, like, we've kind of seen Natasha McElhone a couple of times in the show or in the movie, watching the show from her own apartment, kind of just gazing up at him, hoping he's going to make this choice. And then when he steps out, we're back to her. And I just love that as like a little filmmaking choice.
And it hit me this time too, because she knows where to go. She was in the movie.
Yeah.
And they're obviously at like some island or studio, but it's off coast of California, or it's in California. So she knows exactly where to go, and you presume that he's looking for her anyway. She's got to get him before he gets to the airport. Because he's going to Fiji.
Right. He's going to
Fiji. But he's also the most recognizable person on the planet.
Yeah.
But then after we see her, it cuts to the two security guards, shout out security guards, and they're like, oh man, well, let's see what else is on, which is like, that is the public. It's like, you got their attention just for a little bit. When it changes, when it ends.
On to the next.
On to the next. And so, but I'm glad we're talking about the end, because before we even get to casting, let's talk about a sequel. If they was a sequel to the Truman Show now, with the same character, with the same characters, but it could be anything. And then we'll talk like casting or different things after that. What could that be? So even after he leaves the set, all we know is he's the most recognizable face on the planet. And he has a longing for Sylvia, is her name in the movie.
That's right, Sylvia. And
she's coming to where he is. He has no money, but that's not gonna be a big deal, because so one thing I think happens in the interim. So when we would catch up in 2023, he sues the corporation. And it's like 1998, but it's like he sues them, he wins the case in 2000, gets like $1 billion. because this is a lifetime. They stole his whole life. I don't think there's any way that he doesn't get like a historic settlement for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now he's also one of the richest people on the planet. Now that doesn't have to be. I don't know what it could really be anything, but that's what I think. Like, there's one logical path to that happening pretty
Mm-hmm.
quickly. Because when he gets out, we have ambulance chase with lawyers. How many lawyers are going to be trying to contact Truman Burbank
For
after he
sure.
gets out of here? Like, bro, you can get it.
That's a come
Maybe he
up.
turns him down, but there's almost no way to escape it because he can't go anywhere and hide, at least initially.
Right.
Yeah. You could even turn that into a class action lawsuit where people who are watching it are like, whoa, I was affected by this too. I need some of that money.
Yeah, for sure. That's crazy. Yeah, I mean, it's hard, this question, and I also tried to think of like what would, just a modern day remake of this look like, and it's really kind of hard for me to wrap my head around. But I do think, if you do a sequel to this, I really don't know how it doesn't turn dark. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if this film can even. Well, I guess it can. Anything can have a sequel, but like the kind of ending of this film sets you up for like a fairy tale ending, right? Fiji, right? It's the furthest place you can go on the planet before
Well,
you turn back around. And I think
let's take us through what you think happens to Truman after he leaves.
for sure. I think I think what the film is promising us is that eventually they make it away to Fiji, right? It's supposed to be this like remote place. I think that's why it's chosen more than anything else, right? This remote paradise. I think there's an attempt to disappear, but I don't know that they ever can. I like your idea where at least they get $1 billion for their trouble, but it kind of seems like a dark.
Yeah.
Kind of seems like a dark ending. I feel like maybe if you stay with it for 6 more months, you get that dark sci-fi original take on it.
Yeah, where you get that like the conversation style paranoia, even though he's no longer in a show.
Although I just, now that you say that conversation and paranoia, I would say, if you're doing it in modern day, I mean, it does become even better because everybody's got a camera on them now.
Yeah.
Well, the question is, I think to me, where is Truman 25 years later?
I think he's on one of those islands in Fiji where people haven't been yet.
He just stays. He stays on the Fiji.
I think he doesn't want to ever be seen again.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah.
He's been viewed his whole life, and now he wants to get away. I think life becomes a lot more complicated for him to handle, and I think 25 years later, he's going to try to crawl back into the Truman Show world if he can.
I was
yeah, go ahead, B.
I was just saying I wasn't necessarily thinking about trying to crawl back into the Truman Show world, though. That's interesting. Well, I could see like after a decade or so away, he misses that sweet fame. You know what I mean?
This is true. I think there might be that the Truman Show was the #1 rated show, right, in this world. Everybody watched it. To the point where even when they couldn't find Truman and they just had that blank screen where they're like, we'll be right back.
Right.
The creator of the show goes, this doesn't seem like an issue. We've had higher ratings now just with this blank screen than anything else.
Yeah.
So I think that creator creates a new show, and it's with a new person, right?
Right.
And instead of doing kind of taken from the Matrix, where Agent Smith was going like, you realize how many versions of reality we created for humans that make it so that people are happy, like give them everything they want, but then it failed. I think the next version is just Truman Show 2.0, except throw a whole lot of issues at them. Like it's a Tyler Perry movie. There's too much drama. It's not like a nice world.
the writer said if he was the sequel, he was thinking about one where multiple subjects, multiple channels have a starring subject born on the show. So like if it was in New York, it'd be people from different boroughs or whatever. And they're never meant to meet, but at the end of the first season, he says, so if it was a series, but even if it was a movie, a boy from one part would meet a girl from another part. They're kind of drawn to each other and they meet because they realize, oh, you're the only one not acting weird like everybody else is acting because they're both on their own shows. And then they have like a love story there.
That's
But see,
interesting.
I think in the aftermath of the Truman Show, Ed Harris's character, jumps off the Golden Gate at some point. It's too traumatic for him. He loses everything, gonna lose everything in this lawsuit. I think Truman and Sylvia, obviously they reconnect, but I just don't think it can last.
Yep.
I like the idea of them having a kid together, but I don't know if they even do that. And he goes to Fiji, he's there for a long time. The Office comes out and he loses his mind because all these people know they're being like it's a mockumentary. He's like, what? Maybe he does a cameo on like Modern Family or The Office, one of these mockumentary shows. Because like the world kind of went in a different way. I think when I think about like stars from the 90s or even rap and what we thought it would be when we were growing up and where it is now, it's like, oh yeah, everything had to grow up, but like the world never ended. Like everybody adjusted.
Mm-hmm.
It's like stars from the 60s or 70s and the 90s were one thing. And we kind of assumed that the stars from the 90s would be that thing by now, but they're not. They're like still stars. It wasn't cyclical like we thought it would be.
Right.
So to do a Truman Show reboot, or no, not a reboot, like a sequel, a continuation, 2023, I think he would have to like be on Survivor or something, or Big Brother, one of those reality shows, or he does like the Truman Show Bachelor. And then everybody's like, what happened to the girl from high school? He's like, well, it didn't work out and I've traveled the world and I've stayed undercover, but now I want to find love. And he's like on The Bachelor, but it brings out like this crazy like PTSD for him, and we see him like make it through a show, or maybe he doesn't make it through a show and there's some other plot line running through, but something that gets him back on reality TV. And he's like, maybe, or even he's like an activist for like reality TV, like against reality TV or against unions or something. It actually made me think about Monica Lewinsky, who was like such a big figure because of what happened in the 90s with her and Bill Clinton. And she took the brunt of all of that. Like, did the Clintons, face any, their punishment was like Hillary not winning 20 years later, kind of, I mean, I know that's not like direct or anything, but she faced the brunt of the prosecution, the media scrutiny and public scrutiny after that. And now she's like an activist and an author, and she's found her own place in the world. But many accounts that I've seen or read is like, man, it was a tough couple decades for her. I think Truman tries to completely get off the grid and maybe even succeeds for a while, but eventually feels like he has a bigger purpose.
He's
the only one that's ever done this thing. And he's seeing what happens. He's seeing reality stars that in their own lives, and I think he feels like he has to like do something or be a voice or even, not that he misses the fame because he didn't know he was famous, but he realizes there's something that he can do that nobody else can do.
I think it's interesting, especially when you think about like, the world of like nostalgia and IP, in 2023, Truman Show world, they're definitely trying to do a reboot. You know what I mean? Like it's that was in 98. It's been 25 years. They definitely want a new a reboot for the new generation or something like that.
But there's like stipulations. It's like you have to tell the kid,
right.
Everybody agrees, but like 8 years old, you have to tell them that they're on a show, Or Truman comes back and like runs for president. And then he's in a different kind of like reality TV scrutiny, even than reality TV can provide, you know?
Right. Right. Oh, that's interesting. I like a version of like the Squid Game at the end of Squid Game where
Did
Truman
not
got
see it, so
out.
you have to explain it to me.
Well, it's not a huge spoiler, but Truman got out. They
Uh-huh.
started making versions of his show again. He sees it as, immoral. So he tries to break back in to free those people.
I th- I think there's even a way to do like right like because like you know how in the real world they've started making Squid Game shows that are like
Hmm.
inspired by the Squid Game fictional show. So like
Hmm.
almost like if people wanted to go and be Truman, right? You get to
Ooh.
like you know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like you get to sign up to be Truman, like kind of how people sign up to be on the Real World or something like that.
Yeah.
And so it's like the Truman
Hmm.
Show is still a brand. You know what I mean? Even if Truman is no longer on it. Because I feel like, the Ed Harris character, Christoph, you know, I feel like he's going to have a rough road ahead of him with the lawsuits and everything. But I also feel like it's kind of like maybe a Trump thing where, you just tell everybody, yeah, that was a part of the story. Yeah, we were always leading towards Truman to actualize himself and become his own hero and
Right.
escape. You know what I
You
mean?
said,
Like
Hmm.
yeah.
that was the genius of my storytelling. You know what I mean? And people kind of have that thing where if they admit what they're doing with enough confidence to sound like it's not a bad thing, they
Hmm.
get off the hook. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
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 I have a question, uh, before we get into casting. I noticed when Truman, like you said, I had forgot as well how, kind of disenfranchised Truman already was at the beginning, right? He's
Right.
definitely like out of it. And they show you, right? Like he's been having people break on the set his entire life and Truman, it's fake, blah, blah, blah. So he like knows. And there's that part where he escapes and he's dug a hole through the backyard or whatever, but that hole is the same place that he was gardening earlier in the movie. So like, was he already making that hole? Was he planning that
Mm.
escape longer than we realized before the midpoint? You know what I mean?
That's a good question.
That's a great question.
Because he's clearly known about something for a while.
Hmm. Hmm. I want to think so, just to give him a little bit of agency before that point, because he is so like he has no power in the beginning.
Yeah.
Like everything happens to him, and so for him to be thinking about this ahead of time, I think he was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because, like you said, there's no way he built that hole in the time he was supposed to be sleeping.
No.
Right. No, it was a real like kind of what is that movie? Oh man, the movie about the prison with
Shawshank.
Shawshank.
yeah, it's a real
Yeah.
Shawshank Redemption type moment.
Yeah.
It also, the movie is also kind of, I mean, it is about love too. And it's like, he was in a loveless life.
For sure.
You
Hmm.
know, even he said when him and his wife had the big fight, he's like, "You don't even like me." It's like
Right.
intrinsically, when somebody's in opposition to you, and
Yeah,
you can lie to yourself about it. Everybody's done it, at some point for some duration of time,
for sure.
Hmm.
or you can lie to yourself about it. You can go with the flow. You can automate and just be like, "This is the way life is." But he knew he didn't have this love in his life. He even knew his mom wasn't listening to him, and that's everybody can feel like that. Different relationship with your parents, but he knew his wife didn't like him. Only person he really liked was his best friend,
Right.
Hmm.
and they had been best friends since that guy was also a child actor, and apparently there's a whole backstory of him where he's like drug addict and has this terrible depression because of how he's had to live his life as Truman's friend in this show as an actor since he was 10 years old or something.
Hmm.
um so there's also a metaphor of him looking for love, and not even romantic love, just like a genuine connection with somebody that he knows he doesn't have.
Yeah.
I
It's
also
definitely
wonder if he comes into the real world and he's like, I was selling fake insurance. Can I sell real insurance? Like he try when if he ever comes like to society and tries to get a job, he's like, am I actually can I actually do I actually know anything? Can I actually do anything? And has to, just to test himself, tries it out. I think he
definitely.
does.
Definitely, it's really interesting. I thought, when that best friend was giving him that speech, it's like he said, like, I've known you since I was 7 years old, and in a certain way, I was like, so like he's been trapped there too.
Right.
He doesn't get to go, home. You know what I mean? He doesn't have a further life. You know what I mean? Like he has to be on call all the time in this fake world. So I
Yeah.
thought that was a really interesting piece. And like some of the things that he's telling him about it being real, right? Like it's not real. I'm not in on it. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
he is in on it, but also in a certain way, he's not because it's his reality too.
Right. Right.
Right.
That's interesting. I think I would watch the version of that movie where uh they are the only two that can kind of understand that experience, so they reconnect
Mhm.
and become buddies. I'd watch
Yeah.
that.
They like really end up being buddies.
Yeah, yeah.
That'd be interesting.
After like a long cooling off, like a decade later, they like
Hmm.
Truman looks him up and he's like crying. I'm so sorry, man.
Mhm.
I was just a job. And he's like, I know, man. But you're the only person I've ever been able to talk to. There's no
Hmm.
cameras now.
Right.
Even now, a Truman series would be interesting.
Mhm.
Just like we talked, like some of these, watching these old movies, you're like, man, there are some things in the era of reboots that we're in that are just
Mhm.
being overlooked. The Truman Show is one of them. We talked about like Meteor Man, like we're making
Yeah.
fun comic book stuff. These things should definitely be on the table.
Hmm.
Like I said, this one's so fascinating when we're in the age of like overwhelming reality TV.
Right. And
Yeah.
influencers and all of it.
Yeah. I I even wonder if the second Truman Show is just a documentary about Jim Carrey,
Mm.
where he's now in like an entirely different space, right?
Right,
Where
the actual Jim Carrey.
the actual Jim Carrey, what he's up to right now, where it's like, oh yeah, this man was the most famous person in the world. Like truly, he was Truman for a second. Not
In a
necessarily,
way, for
kind of.
sure. Yeah.
And now he's rejecting what brought him to this to us.
Well, he did do this TV series Kidding on Showtime, Kidding, which was kind of like he played like a Mr. Rogers type character who kind of had a breakdown. But I feel like there's some parallels, and that's probably why he took the role to like things he was experiencing. And not to mention, he's been in two Sonic the Hedgehog movies, so he's not completely gone.
Right.
He played the bad guy in two Sonic the Hedgehog movies. So
He's still cashing that check for sure.
he's still cashing them checks, man. He's still being big, doing what he does best, not to like diminish the guy, but nobody could do what Jim Carrey does comedically, you
For
know?
sure.
Yeah,
Uh, let's see what that casting's about.
Let's do the casting.
let's do it.
Maybe should we start or end with Truman? End with Truman?
Yeah, let's
Sure.
end with Truman.
So much more.
And who do we start with? Let me get to the casting thing.
I've got the friend at the bottom of mine. We want to start with the friend.
Yeah.
We do the best friend first. Yeah, we do the best friend first. I got a good one for this.
Cool. Who wants to go first?
You go first, B.
All right, we'll do it. Sam Richardson.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's it.
Yeah,
Makes
Sam
sense.
That's
Richardson.
definitely it. I don't even want to say mine. That feels like so perfect.
What you
Uh,
got?
but if Sam Richardson's unavailable, get Sterling K. Brown in there.
Mm,
Oh, we're gonna bring some gravitas to it, some tears.
Yeah.
Sterling for sure.
I'm gonna throw a curveball. I'm gonna play the best friend. It was kind of a Noah Emmerich's kind of a bigger dude. I was like, oh,
Hey.
we casting big dudes. They don't get bigger than me. I'm putting myself in there.
Yeah, throw yourself in.
That's great because
Amon's casted himself more than once. I was like, I'm pulling an Amon here. Aaron Covington,
Do it.
that's
Lewis
hilarious because
Coltrane.
I nearly casted Amana Doomer.
Man, I was right there. Dang.
Me and Amon sending in self tapes. Like, who's gonna do it? Who's gonna do it?
That's funny.
That's great. Who you got next? Christoph?
No. Oh yeah, let's do it. Dead hair is fine. That's good.
Okay,
That's
Christoph.
Okay.
Christoph, I got Sterling K. Brown.
Ooh. Mm-hmm.
And like that soulful, like final, like I watched your first breath or whatever he says to him. Like I feel like
Mhm.
Sterling could give that in that very like soothing voice of his for sure.
Mm-hmm. Oh, 100%. Now for mine, it's like it's a movie that I'm casting, so I got to throw in the heavy hitter, Coleman
Okay.
Domingo. You know it. Got to keep him in
Pod,
there.
Gotta keep him in
pod
mind.
favorite.
Pod
Favorite
fave.
Coleman Domingo for sure.
I went big with this one too, just because it was more fun. Sam Jackson.
Mm.
Oh, yeah.
I also like Forrest Whitaker. I'm gonna swear Forrest Whitaker. I'm gonna go Forrest Whitaker.
I was thinking Forrest Whitaker too. I think he'd be great. Yeah, it's got to be him.
Do we have the girlfriend? Not the wife, the
Uh,
girlfriend.
yeah.
Oh.
So Sylvia, I went with
Sylvia.
Cynthia Erivo.
Mm-hmm.
Harry Tubman?
Yeah, Harriet Tubman for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah, perfect. I didn't initially cast this, but right away comes to mind is like that like picture perfect wife playing this thing. I'm going with
No,
Gabrielle
this is the
Union.
girlfriend. This is the girlfriend.
Oh yeah, yeah, the girlfriend.
The one that
Oh
he misses and never he's running away to. Who really there's a couple the flashback scenes she's in, but almost all of her movie was shot probably in 1 or 2 days because it's just her in her apartment
Right.
watching it. It's very interesting filmmaking.
yeah, totally. I'm going with Gabrielle Union. She's someone who could hold the frame by herself.
I'm
Duffy.
gonna go with Rosario
Mm,
Dawson.
Mm. Hmm.
for
Rosario
sure.
Dawson. Um,
The wife.
and the wife,
Yeah,
yeah, to the wife.
she's a wife.
I
Laura
went with
Linney, not Laura Dern, Laura Linney.
Laura Linney, not Laura Dern for
Make sure I
sure.
get that correct. I was looking right at her Wikipedia when I said it too. I'm like, God, it's so embarrassing. Laura Linney.
I went with Kiki
Mm.
Palmer for
Kiki,
sure.
are you with me? Are you
Hmm.
riding? Kiki Palmer.
Definitely.
Pop fave.
I think she just to like give a short explanation. She's so good at like kind of like that southern charm lady voice,
For sure.
like older sort of like just an older era type of voice that she does sometimes for like fun. So
Yeah.
I'd love to see her do that as like a 50s kind of housewife.
Yeah, for her to be like, honey, try this coffee.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
You
Hmm.
know what I mean?
Hmm. That's great.
Amon, who you got?
Uh, just continuing the gravitas, like Lupita Nyong'o.
Whoa.
Throw her in there. She did it in Us. She proved that she can play these two
Yeah,
real quick
versatile.
changes.
Versatile.
Throw her in
I
there.
I went with Kerry Washington.
Great choice.
Mm. Hmm.
Good old Hilda. Everybody wants to talk about Scandal. I'm talking about Django. Shout out to Hildy.
Hildy. I forgot her
But
name was
Kerry
Hildy.
Washington. Also, we had her last week because we talked about I Think I Love My Wife with Chris Rock when we were talking about Before Sunrise.
For
And
sure.
it
Mhm.
was really thinking about that movie that made me think about her. Even though she's the opposite in that movie. She's like a prostitute in that movie or escort or something. But we know she's super versatile. Kerry Washington.
Ooh, of course.
Um, I would also throw I don't know. There's so many roles in here. I don't know. I would throw like Keith David as the network executive, Philip Baker
Mm.
Hall, I might throw Little Rel in as a Paul Giamatti character. I don't know, man.
Oh
Mm.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
A lot
yeah.
of lot of fun stuff for people to play. But who do you have for Truman Burbank is the name. They just named him after the city of Burbank.
I went with Lakeith Stanfield.
Makes
Hmm.
sense. I knew somebody was gonna pick Lakeith here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Oh, I also think Donald Glover could do this really well.
for sure.
yeah. I think so.
If we're talking about Atlanta cast, that's neither is who I picked, but
Right. Yeah. I think Lakeith would kill it. I went down the route of who is let's pull from the same lineage, the In Living Color lineage. And I
Ooh,
went Marlon Wayans.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I like that quite a bit.
He can do it. He's like he
He
could
has the
play the
same,
bigness, he could play the
yeah,
quiet.
the big energy. He really
Mhm,
has it, and he's a good actor too. I mean, he's done some good roles. I thought, like dramatic performances and stuff.
for sure.
I
Definitely.
I went with Keegan Michael Key.
Mm.
Aha, yeah.
I was like, he's an actor that has, to me, the closest like energy to this, just naturally.
Hmm.
I've been watching Schmigadoon season 2,
Okay.
Nice.
now, and yeah, I think he's really talented. He's the first person that came to mind when I was like about 10 minutes into the movie.
Oh yeah. Give him the big role. He's great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's
This
great.
and
this
it is.
uh this
Go ahead.
movie was a this movie was fascinating and so layered. It had so much to it. It was almost a horror movie. I think pretty close to a horror movie.
For such a simple premise and such like kind of broad performances, there is a lot of layers going on. And no slight to any of the work that anybody's doing in the movie, but that score is doing a lot of the heavy lifting. Like, my
Mhm.
God, what a score.
I mean, speaking of how like the great behind the scenes people in this movie, Philip Glass
Yeah, for sure.
did some of the music for this, and he's just look him up. I'm not gonna go through the whole thing, but if you look up Philip Glass, he's
Mhm.
got a 20-page Wikipedia page. I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely top names in this movie. And apparently this movie was like budgeted for like 80 million, but they shot it for 60, and 12 of that went to Jim Carrey. So this was like a $48 million movie.
Wow.
Whoa.
Uh,
It saved 20 on the budget, huh?
yeah, and if you're a screenwriter or a director, movies like this, you can really see how you can save money and still get like huge production out of
Mhm,
it, huge scale. Um, Highly recommend a lot of these like 80s and 90s movies for economy of production
mhm.
and economy of writing. You don't have to write like a throng of people gathered in Times Square to watch the Truman. You can just have them at a restaurant in a couple lines.
Right. One guy in the bathtub.
Yeah, one guy in a bathtub. Yeah, fascinating movie, fascinating premise. Um, that's it, man. Truman
Yeah,
Show. Check it
Whew.
out if you haven't.
for sure. As relevant now as it has ever been.
It definitely would be interesting, like to think about a Truman Show with literally any other kind of person in there, a woman lead or any minority lead. I mean,
Mhm.
Hmm.
definitely has some different layers to it, but those
Yeah.
are, think about that in your free time. We're about to wrap it up.
Yeah. And lastly, I was going to say they've done a version of the Truman Show as real reality TV. Like most recently, I thought of Jury Duty,
Mm.
Yeah.
that one show where they get one person who's not an actor to be surrounded by actors,
Mm.
put them in strange situations. One of the people we know, Ishmael's in it.
Yeah,
And
they did another show called like Average Joe or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
oh
And it was
right.
the same thing. But Jury Duty is like set as like they're at a jury and there's one guy that doesn't. And this was kind of like set out as a reality competition. And I think they filmed another season of it recently. My buddy Londell was in it,
Oh nice.
but it hasn't aired yet. But where they're on like a reality show, like a Big Brother type of thing, but everybody's an actor except for one person.
Mm.
I think it was called The Average Joe, or maybe it was something different. I did not. I just remembered it now when a mom brought up Jury Duty.
Mm,
But
yeah. It's it's real. It's happening.
last thing, this movie was nominated for Best Directing, Supporting Actor, and Screenplay. Interesting that Jim Carrey wasn't nominated.
Mhm.
It was maybe
Mm,
a tough year, but I feel like for the screenplay and director to get nominated, he probably should have got a nod. But hey, it's an
yeah.
imperfect science.
It's imperfect.
Right.
They got him. They got him. They got him eventually. Didn't they? He was nominated for. Was he nominated for Eternal Sunshine?
No, I no,
If not, that's a shame.
Unknown, my friend.
no.
Oh, okay. Things are not good. That just ruined my day right there.
I don't know that he's ever been nominated for an Academy Award. He's got a bunch of awards, but
That's a shame. I wonder if that's political in terms of his like rejecting of all this stuff.
I wonder, man. Even for that Andy Kaufman Man on the Moon movie, I feel like he could have got a nom. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
Really, Dumb and Dumber or something should have got a nom. He's so big in some of these old comedies that he probably should have got some love for it. But alas.
Mm.
Uh B, you got anything to throw out there at the end here?
No, not really. I just like you said, I think it's something that's still kind of relevant. And like I said, for anybody who's kind of looking for maybe some of the craft piece of it, um, I think a really instructive movie to watch. Just to get some of that pacing, some of that timing, and some of those big dramatic turns uh, down, and some good examples of them.
That's for sure.
For sure.
Cool.
All right. Well, we'll see you guys next time. Black Guys and White Movies. Remember to like, subscribe, share. That stuff's important, you know.
Mhm.
And really, you know, I subscribe to a bunch of friends' podcasts and YouTube channels. I'll always check out at least like one app, but I like to support people I know. So hope people like to support us. And we'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Peace.
Peace.
Peace.